I feel like you have suffered a lot, and I feel that you have a lot of power in you. And I wonder how you align the necessity for surrender in order that we may convey a great, ever-present, omnipresent, omniscient wisdom accessible to all of us if we are clear, with your own rather robust individualism. I wonder if you ever feel fracture and crisis within yourself. I wonder if even under attack you've ever thought about ending your own life. I wonder if you've ever been concerned that you are mentally ill. I wonder if you've ever felt hopeless and desperate given the escalation of these crises and the way that you have been attacked.
You know, God does things to me. And I'll just say this. I'm not trying to brag. It's just you ask the question. I'll wake up at 3:35 in the morning or whenever it is. And God will say, the Spirit will say to me, you know, I'm completely real. I want you to get up and walk into the kitchen, and it's going to be 3:36 exactly. And this has happened to me hundreds of times, hundreds since I was a little kid. And I walk in, and it's always the exact number. Now, you can say, well, I've got an inner clock, whatever. We know that butterflies can fly from central Mexico all the way to central Canada and then lay their eggs and then fly all the way back. How does it know how to go to Mexico?
There we go, friends. Welcome, everybody. Matt was tearing up a little bit after hearing that beautiful defense of the existence of God from none other than the pride of Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
I believe the question was regarding a mental illness in the wake of the judgment against you about the Sandy Hook kids. But you know, butterflies. How do they?
I think there's a lot to learn there, man. We gotta get on. Like, I think we need to start throwing in random science facts. Poorly describing them too. to
yeah,
sort of make points on this program.
I have a little bit. There was a brief moment. My undergrad at Minnesota State University had a robust, to use a word that Russell uses, a robust astronomy department where I really thought like, and I was listening to Astronomy Cast. I really I'm going to do this astronomy thing. And then I looked into some of the classes I would have to take beyond just the intro to astronomy for like general electives. And it was a lot of math. And I'm like, it's not just being like, whoa, Uranus has these, or Jupiter has these, not Jupiter, which is the one with the rings, Saturn. That's the one with the rings. So yeah, see, but yeah, talking just total garbage is.
I mean, my favorite, you know, I have to remember that Alex Jones is a real pig because I'm now almost exclusively exposed to him from like those kind of incredible clips or the awesome like meme clips. I'm sure people have seen a bunch of those where they, you know, just get Alex Jones when he's fired up talking about humanity or things like that. You have to remember that he is a pretty despicable person. But I do love the waxing philosophically about butterflies, Mexico and shit. Hell yeah.
They're both him and Russell Brand are at their like peak, like that line of questioning. I just imagine like superimposing Sam or like even like Ben Burgess or someone like, or anyone being set up that way. Like you have a lot of pain in you, but also a lot of power. Like that is bizarre form of question.
So awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, like as anyway, we shouldn't over analyze it, but like as Brand is going on, you could see Jones being like, hell yeah, yes sir, dude, I am fighting the demons, I am fighting the deep state, and it's because God tells me what time it is all the time.
Yeah, and I think enough is if Russell's really wondering if Alex Jones has moments of crisis and if he has maybe some issues dealing with things, there's court documents that have been published online that you can go through and say to your curiosity.
Well, folks, welcome with that introduction. Welcome to Left Reckoning 145, Drones, Musk, and Javier Milei, with our special guest tonight, Nick Turse. It's going to be a really fun show. Hope you guys are having a good week, getting ready for, if you're in the U.S., a nice little break and Thanksgiving weekend. We got a few things to get to. We're obviously going to talk about the election results in Argentina. We're going to talk to Nick Turse in just a moment. By the way, there are links below to read his article. It's very important, and we're spending some time with about a conflict that I think does not get enough coverage, certainly in general, but also on the talking circuit. So we're really happy to have Nick on the program. Y'all might remember him from a recent interview over the summer, I believe, on Henry Kissinger and the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say his book on Vietnam, "Kill Anything That Moves," also has. It's interesting in the context of the conversation we have tonight about like how many of these incidents are fully investigated and brought to light, and then what lesson did we learn as a society about them? Because, for instance, My Lai in Vietnam, actually, that stuff was pretty common. That those massacres like that, and we made one. We got like accountability for one, but they were calling like our troops had like nicknames like Zippo squads, the Zippo lighter, meaning you would set villages on fire. So like, but yeah, I really, it's really nice to be able to have Nick on again because he's really a really great journalist.
No, absolutely. So they'll be on in just a minute. But, and reminding folks, of course, to join us in the post game patreon.com/left reckoning, where we're going to have some fun clips and some time to hang out with all of y'all immediately after the show. Patreon.com/left reckoning, get access to that. But before we get to Nick, before we get to Argentina, there's a couple quick stories we want to start with. And this is going to be another one of those episodes where we're covering unfortunate events. But before we talk about bad things, let's talk about one very good piece of news from my home state, where there was a huge loss for the anti-education forces in the state of Texas. The Texas House voted 84-63 in favor of an amendment by John Raines, who's a Republican, which removed the education savings account provision in this education bill. Layman's terms, vouchers. There was an attempt that was spearheaded by Greg Abbott, by a lot of members of the right, to try to privatize large parts of our public education system here in Texas. It has always been a lightning rod, something that is worth avoiding for the Republican Party here, because, as in like a lot of other states in this country, rural America very much depends on public schools, not just for the education of children, but also for employment, for community. And it's a pretty damn good thing that it does that. That has meant that Texas, unlike some other Republican controlled states, has always had a pretty hard fight in terms of privatizing and weakening public education in this state. And this is just another great example of that. So 21 Republicans, most of them represented rural districts, joined with all of the Democrats in the Texas House of Representatives to pull this provision. So something we're celebrating. It's something that a lot of people had sort of predicted. There were some weeks when it was looking like it might be in doubt. Obviously, Greg Abbott, the Republican Party, has been trying to strong arm a lot of people into supporting it. There was a really cynical move that they did where they tried to tie increased funding for schools and teachers to this education savings account, again, effectively vouchers. And I think most people saw right through that it was so cynical that the kind of attack line that people like Greg Abbott and other members of the Republican Party who were in support of the education savings accounts, or I'm just going to call them vouchers for now. I think most people saw how cynical it was, and I don't think that they're going to be able to use that and attack as say, oh, so and so, refuse certain amounts of funding for schools. And at a certain point too, it's like they went really hard when you're sort of starting out with this really aggressive move again to try to attach increased funding for schools to this. And I think that sort of left them, once people didn't want to move on that, it really didn't leave them with very many opportunities or moves to pull. So Abbott's pissed. Our little governor, Patrick, is pissed. Fuming, actually. He released a statement attacking Republican House Speaker Dade Phelan, who voted present, over the failure, saying, quote, talk about a lack of leadership. So love seeing those folks mad, frankly.
That's awesome. I mean, that's so important. Maintaining public schools, because we just what do we know about any sort of approaching any issue? Healthcare.
Mhm.
We can't be parceling this up into different sorts of empowering people as consumers. No, public universal goods and
Mhm.
are the schools aren't good enough. That's because they are tied to property taxes, and we are not taxing the rich people enough to give your kids a good school, and that needs to happen for every kid, no matter what their zip code is. And all this stuff, the bigotry stuff we see with or CRT or the anti trans stuff, trans panic. Part of that is just like let's turn the bigots out in the primaries and in the general. It's also a way to undermine what is a very valued part of any community, which is the public school, and not least in Texas, where you have like the Friday Night Lights stuff, and in small towns, everybody knows that is one of the central hubs of society, and we need to be not only defending that but basically using that as a launch pad, like we did see during the pandemic of, oh, all of a sudden these places that have kitchens, we're going to start feeding people or let people like come pick up food in a drive through just to have that. And like that's how we start to build the society, and the right wing knows that, and that's why they attack that. And most severely the teachers union, who is the most clear about where this attack comes from.
Yeah, and I think they lost pretty big. I mean, Abbott's already, we're going to be going into elections here in this state, so I'm sure there's going to be kind of big money attempts to try to unseat some of these Republicans. I think they have a pretty tall task ahead of them if they think they're going to be able to overtake all of these folks. Yeah, there we go. Try that in a small town. And then also in news that probably surprises nobody over the weekend, Greg Abbott endorsed Donald Trump. I think at this point we all sort of get it. Trump is going to very likely win the Republican nomination for president, and people
Yep.
are lining up behind him. All right, so good news there. The endorsement, who cares? But the education story, huge. But let's take a look at something else, and let's take a little look at free speech, Matt. At a free speech defender, Elon Musk, who has decided that it is time to attack the First Amendment. Now, a little bit of primer here. I'm sure everybody has seen it. I know a lot of people have been covering this. I'm sure Matt Bender has been covering this a lot. Um, but this story here, I'll zoom in a little bit. This story here from Media Matters. As Musk endorses anti Semitic conspiracy theory, X has been placing ads for Apple, Bravo, IBM, Oracle, and Xfinity next to pro Nazi content. And this might be a little small for y'all, but let's see if I can zoom in enough for you to see it. Here is the screenshots that Media Matters provided, where you have these kind of, you can literally see Hitler, a bunch of Nazis right there.
Yeah, I'll summarize that meme for it's what people think a spiritual awakening is, and it's a woman doing yoga versus what it's actually like, and it's a Nazi rally. So yeah.
And there's more of these. You have Oracle, you have IBM, you have a bunch of other companies, and it's just something that everybody has been
I mean,
saying. and knows
IBM's
at this point.
probably IBM's like don't bring that up, guys. We've been trying to lie low for 70 years.
So it's extremely clear from this reporting, but also just anecdotally that I'm sure everyone has seen these kind of far right racist accounts posting things and then seeing bizarrely an ad for Xfinity or whomever next to it. As we have seen, many advertisers have been pulling their advertising from Twitter because they don't want to be next to, again, calls for the reestablishment of the Third Reich. Next to their call to buy an iPhone. And Musk is obviously very, very pissed. It's been very funny, by the way, just to note from Twitter so far, what we have been getting is not so much a denial that there is a bunch of far right Nazi and white supremacist stuff on Twitter,
Mhm.
But rather that no, we're not serving ads next to it. We're just hosting, right? Which is a very incredible retreat for them. So Musk threatened over the weekend to file a quote thermonuclear lawsuit against Media Matters for America, and has done so now and has filed it, I believe, in the North District Court of Texas, the District Court of North Texas. And it's a very clear attack on the First Amendment. This is quoting from a CNN story on this. Some legal experts are panning Elon Musk's lawsuit targeting the watchdog group Media Matters, saying the complaint filed Monday by X, the platform known as Twitter, I hate saying, runs contrary to the First Amendment and could backfire wildly if it progresses at all. And again, as I was saying, at this point, they're not even denying the fact that they are hosting far right content. So, on this, I think that it's extremely clear. This is an attempt. This is literally like, if you care about free speech as a principle, this is literally the kind of thing that we're talking about, defending people's right, particularly journalists, to be able to report on reality and not have their reporting be under threat by, again, a very wealthy person who wants to shut down, quote, again,
And for
free
what?
speech.
The damages are ad revenue? Like, I mean, it's preposterous. I mean, really, it's a test of how ludicrous our judicial system is. Because, like we said, like Elon Musk replied to a guy saying, basically, I mean, the sort of like goes Soros, cultural Marxist, Dreyfus Affair style. They're undermining us from within, anti-Semitic conspiracy that Jewish people are responsible for like CRT or whatever, and like, I just. And he's like, this is actually correct. And so, and he's been doing stuff like this for a long time. I mean, the Kanye sort of back and forth, right? Like, there's a qualitative, I have noticed, this is just one person's opinion, but uptake in Holocaust deniers and those types of folks on Twitter. And like, to blame Media Matters for that, and the damages are I mean, it's absurd. And again, like, yeah, that is really like suppression of speech here with the courts.
And again, I think that the location of where this has been filed matters. Again, despite how Musk keeps on trying to present himself, his companies and most of his holdings are outside of the state of Texas. In fact, even Tesla, the most famous company that he moved here, he moved the vast majority of its operations back to California in a very well publicized event with none other than Gavin Newsom. So we'll get to the Texas aspect. We'll jump into it in just 1 second. But the fact that they're filing in Texas is ridiculous because, again, Twitter is a company where most of its operations are in California. I believe it's incorporated somewhere in another Western state. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But again, it's not incorporated here. Its operations are in California. Media Matters, of course, is based out of Washington, D.C. And of course, they're trying to file it in a court that has laid a lot of pretty right-wing rulings, including being the one where the student loan forgiveness was challenged. But if Musk's attack on free speech isn't enough, you have a very embarrassing group of people, notably the government of the state of Texas, tripping over themselves, trying to show up in support for him. And you now have the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, who, as folks remember, has just gotten out of a pretty scandalous corruption trial here in the state house. Who filed this just the other day. Attorney General Ken Paxton opens investigation into Media Matters for potential fraudulent activity. Quote, "We are examining the issue closely to ensure that the public has not been deceived by the schemes of radical left-wing organizations who would like nothing more than to limit freedom by reducing participation in the public square." And, you want to talk about collusion, something pretty depressing about, again, a state like Texas, a proud state, right, with all of its fault, a proud state, basically tripping over itself to do free media publicity and support for a California corporation to make sure that California companies can protect their bottom line ad revenue. So we are now going to be wasting public money harassing Media Matters so that people like Ken Paxton can maybe get some money from Daddy Elon. Pretty embarrassing across the board. Now, I would just make a quick suggestion to Ken Paxton and to the rest of the state government in Texas, because there are a lot of companies that are engaged in dangerous and fraudulent activities in the state of Texas that have caused tremendous damage to Texans. There's a company that I can think of right now off the top of my head that is hurting Texans on a daily basis. Everyday Texans, working class Texans, denying property owners in Texas the right to enjoy their property. their homes and their surrounding areas. And that company, of course, is none other than Elon Musk's SpaceX, which has now spectacularly blown up 2 rockets over South Texas, causing untold environmental and social damage to the people of South Texas. We have a quote here from Rebecca Hinojosa, who was a former guest of this program, who said to My San Antonio, I live in Brownsville, over 20 miles away from the launch pad. And I was in my apartment, and my whole apartment started shaking. And when I went to check outside my patio, I saw the explosion. Talking about, again, this another big explosion from Elon Musk's failed rocket company. Elon Musk's company is going to be sued by a few environmental groups in the state of Texas for the damage that they have caused from the previous explosion. And I'm certain that what happened over the weekend will also be included in that. Let me just pull up some of these organizations here in the San Antonio article. Surf Rider Foundation, Save the Rio Grande Valley, the Carrizo Nation of Texas filed a lawsuit for the explosion test mission that sent particulate matter raining down on the surrounding area on April 20th. And again, over the weekend, we saw another similar example of the dangerous activities, again, of a rich South African who's very happy to talk big about the state of Texas, but has made it very clear that he wants to make sure that the money that he's making in the state is all flowing to California. So if people like Paxton, if people like Abbott and all these folks are worried about some of these companies causing trouble for everyday Texans, they should be looking a little bit closer at somebody named Elon Musk for the damage that he's done. 1 with SpaceX, 2 with the Boring Company, and 3 in Tesla, for example, when his company caused the death of a construction worker building the Tesla Gigafactory near Austin, Texas. So, embarrassing group of people in politics, embarrassing group of people in front of industry and major corporations in this country and in this state.
Yeah, well,
They're
just
all full of
on
shit
that,
when they sit here and they start talking about protecting free speech and American values and things like that. Because these people are very happy to step on them as soon as it starts to affect their bottom line.
on that note of really stupid people, I don't know if you saw the team that's coming together to help save Twitter with ad spending. Tim Dillon, or sorry, not Tim Dillon, Seth Dillon, Babylon B. This guy, I can't remember why he's a Babylon B guy, but I think he's famous for getting upset, not like jokes about like abortions, anti-abortion people. Tim Pool also Timcast will commit to $250,000 over the next few months. And
just recycling the money that he's been given.
Well,
by
precisely that. And also, I'll just note, like, Apple alone, as Matt Bender pointed out, spent $100 million a year. So you guys are going to need to step up, but you might need to sell some of the skate park if you're going to help float this, because paying back those Saudis and paying back JP Morgan for all that money that they gave your daddy Elon to buy that, you know, I don't know what that repayment schedule is like, but I imagine like I'll take my student loans over Elon's any day of the week.
Yes, sir. Well, folks, we'll be covering this, obviously. Good news on the education front, bad news on the free speech front. No big surprise there. We're going to jump over to our conversation with Nick Turse, who is a journalist in many places, but most recently in the Intercept. This is a really great piece that's in the show notes. Y'all should definitely read it. It's an important one. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes after that to talk about Argentina. Welcome back, Left Reckoners. David here, joined by my good friend Matt Leck. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, David. Good to be with you.
Yes, certainly, friend. And we are very happy to be joined again by return guest to Left Reckoning, Nick Turse. Nick Turse is a journalist with the Intercept, among other places, who is joining us to talk about this really important piece in the Intercept called Civilian Harm. Secret Pentagon investigation found no one at fault in drone strike that killed woman and 4-year-old. Nick, again, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. And maybe before we talk about this specific strike itself, Could you just help some of the audience understand what it is that the United States is doing in Somalia in the first place? Because I feel like that is one of those conflict areas. I think a lot of people sort of have missed the American involvement in that part of the world.
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, the United States has been involved in Somalia since just after 9/11. At this point, with the end of the Afghan war, it's really the most forever of the forever wars. America dispatched commandos there in early 2002, and by and large, the U.S. has had a presence there ever since, conducting counterterrorism operations on the ground alongside Somali forces, some of which the United States has actually built over the years. Two special operations forces in particular. One, the Puntland Security Force, was built by the CIA. Another called Danab, or the Lightning Brigade, that was built by special operations forces. So the United States has actually constructed Somali units and has fought and even died alongside them. In 2017, a Navy SEAL named Kyle Milliken was actually killed in Somalia. The United States said that he was on an advise and assist mission, but this is a fiction that they use. These advise and assist missions are really combat under another name. So the United States has had a ground presence like that, and then the analog to it is the drone operations that the United States conducts, and those have been going on since 2007. They peaked during the Trump years, but they've been carried out by every president since the drone war started. So Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden.
Yeah, and I mean,
Oh, sorry. Could you, sketch those periods out and the different sort of administrations and how they either ramped up or decelerated the drone war?
Sure. I mean, the drone war began, really in earnest under Obama, but it came to full fruition during the Trump administration. The U.S. conducted, I think, 208 declared attacks in Somalia during Trump's single term in the White House. It was almost 500% increase over the 8 years of the Obama presidency. And under the Biden administration, there have been a little over 30 drone strikes, including 13 so far this year. So it was a massive spike during the Trump administration because, and we can certainly go into this, the Trump administration loosened the rules of engagement from the Obama years. There were certainly civilians killed during Obama's term, and it looks like there have been, it's possible civilians have been killed during the Biden presidency, but both of them have somewhat stricter rules for how drone strikes are carried out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk certainly about, the context and the reasons that this happened, but, just to sort of catch some of the listeners up, I mean, could you talk a little bit about the circumstances and the consequences of this drone strike in Somalia that you're covering in your Intercept piece that killed a woman and her 4-year-old child?
Sure. This piece of the Intercept is the first ever publication of a Pentagon investigation of a U.S. drone strike in Africa. It's an inquiry into a April 1st, 2018 attack in Somalia that, as you said, killed a young mother and her 4-year-old daughter. And it's the first case in which U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, ever acknowledged civilian deaths in Somalia. So this came after hundreds of attacks. The investigation file that I received was heavily redacted, but it still offered really unprecedented insights into how the drone war in Somalia was conducted, and how and why these 2 civilians and possibly as many as 3 more were killed in this U.S. attack. In addition to these formerly secret documents that I was able to obtain, I spoke with 7 members of the family of the woman and child who were killed. I spoke with Somali government officials and U.S. personnel who were involved in the drone war in Somalia. And who had special knowledge of this attack, which was by a secret special operations task force. And, I believe that that this is to this point, the most complete investigation and the most thorough accounting that we have of what a drone strike in Somalia looks like, and how the U.S. Targets and kills people, civilians, in this air war.
Yeah, I mean, if we could talk a little bit about the process here, because one thing that's very striking in your reporting and in the investigation that the U.S. put out was that they initially bombed this truck, which was about, correct me if I'm getting any of these facts wrong, by the way, it was about 7 people inside of this vehicle, and then somebody gets out of the vehicle after it's bombed and is running away, and then the United States sends a second drone strike to strike this person, and this person very likely being this young woman and her child, correct?
Yeah, that's
could you talk a little bit? No, I was just could you talk a little bit about the rules of engagement here, because paraphrasing it. But one of the people that you interviewed in the piece is this just sort of like, I don't know, what kind of rules of like, if they're saying that the United States did nothing wrong, then there must be a fundamental problem with the rules that the United States is utilizing when it comes to drone strikes in Somalia.
Yeah, that's exactly right. With the investigation that was conducted, in the end, they admitted that this woman and the child were killed, but they also said that the rules of engagement were followed and that all the standard operating procedures of all drone strikes in Somalia are run exactly like this. So it points to a fundamental problem with the U.S. air war. This strike cell was watching this truck that you talked about that loaded up with 7 people, including the woman and child. They were they were just innocent bystanders in this. There isn't a lot of public transportation in Somalia. This woman was going to meet her brother in a rural area of Somalia. No public transport there. The terrorist group Al-Shabaab, who the United States is targeting, has they put pressure on the telecom company in the area, the telephone company that runs cellular service there. They tell this telecom when to turn off service, when to turn it on. They're trying to thwart informants, government surveillance. Because of this, the woman involved, Lodahir Muhammad, was not able to contact her brother, Qasim, by phone. And so, it's customary in Somalia, if you see a woman and child who are walking at the side of the road, to pull over, offer them a ride. It's common courtesy. This is what happened. She didn't know who these people were. She didn't live in the area. They were very low-level Al-Shabaab people who were in this vehicle, or at least two of the men in there were actual members of Al-Shabaab. This is what Somali officials told me. The others, there was an elder and and also a poet. This is an actual profession in Somalia, a paying one. But they lived in the area under Al-Shabaab control, and government officials from the Somali government said to me that, people who live in the area, that's a de facto government, Al-Shabaab. They have to deal with them. So they weren't sure how close they were with the group. But the woman and child, they were definitely civilians. There was another young man in the truck. He was just a student returning home from Mogadishu. Same thing. He was offered a ride and took it. And the U.S. watched all these people load in. The Americans never even knew how many people were in the vehicle. They had an argument about it before the strike. They never really came to a consensus, but someone's opinion won out. But they never got the count right. They figured it was 5 or 6 people. It was actually 7. They didn't believe that there were any women on board. There was one. They didn't believe there were any children on board. There was one. And under the rules of engagement, men who associate with a member of Al-Shabaab in Al-Shabaab territory. This is what I was told by Brigadier General Don Bolduc, who headed Special Operations Command at the time. He said that under the rules, military-age males in the Al-Shabaab area hanging out with members of Al-Shabaab would be targeted and counted as Shabaab members, whether they were or they weren't. And this is how this strike was carried out. So, they believed that they were in the clear because they thought they were just men in there. But even watching video of this the entire time, they got it wrong, and they had a second chance because, as you said, they hit this truck with a missile, and somehow at least Lowell and quite possibly her daughter survived it. And they leapt out and they ran down the road, and then they were hit by what they call a double tap strike. They made an instantaneous decision. Drone operators generally call these squirters. This is the terminology that they use. They saw them headed down the road, and they fired another missile, and that was the one that killed them.
I mean, and the way that the United States, or frankly, a lot of other powers designate who is and who's not a combatant, obviously, is tremendously important, as people know from what we've been witnessing in Gaza. But in the aftermath here, I mean, could you talk a little bit about the American government's response to this woman's family, or lack of response, frankly, in the way that we were sort of handling this?
Yeah, in the immediate wake of the strike, when it first happened, or maybe slightly thereafter, I actually contacted AFRICOM about this. And they told me, once they had admitted that they'd killed civilians, that they were interfacing with the embassy and were going to try and work something out, because I asked if they were going to provide compensation. The reality of the situation is that the United States has never made contact with the family, much less provided an apology or any kind of compensation, even though they admitted that they killed a woman and child. Now, there is an English-speaking member of the family, one of Lowell's brothers, Abu Bakr. He also lives part-time in Mogadishu, so he was able to get in touch with the Somali government and ask them to intervene. They did not. He went to the U.S. Embassy and gave them a letter asking for apology, ways towards compensation. He got no response from them. At one time, Africa Command, the only way that you could contact them was through an email address. So he wrote a letter to them and sent it to their email address. He showed me a copy of the letter. He showed me a copy of the return receipt on the email. Then they put in a civilian casualty portal, which for most people around the world doesn't work. They don't have the internet access. They don't have the page is just written in English, so they don't have the language skills. They've made it about as tough as possible, but he's able to navigate this, sent it. He also showed me, it says success submitted, a screenshot of that from when he put that in. He showed me the letter. And again, AFRICOM has never made contact with the family. And, when I went and I spoke with them, they just couldn't wrap their head around it. They couldn't understand how the United States could make this admission and then years later, never even acknowledge the family's contact, never reach out in any way to offer an apology, condolences, anything. And when I showed them the investigation file, I think they became even more incensed by it, because the file says that, a lot of the members of the team were inexperienced. And this is what members of the strike cell told the investigator, that they didn't have a lot of experience, that experienced personnel who were private contractors who work with them had sort of rotated out. They made a lot of this, and the family just couldn't understand it. They said, how can that be an excuse? If you hire inexperienced people, if that's who you have conducting these strikes, how's that an excuse? You're responsible for it. The same thing when I told them and showed them in the document where it says that the rules of engagement were filed. The widower, Shiloh Muhammad, he and the father of the deceased little girl, he couldn't wrap his head around it. He kept asking me, how can they claim that the rules of engagement were followed when they also killed my wife and my child? And I didn't have a satisfactory answer for him, but this is this is what it says in the investigation. And the family came out, I think, even more incensed, even more shocked by what this investigation file says.
Yeah, what does it signify that we're willing to go this far? And also, how meaningful does this mean? We're going to be transparent about these sort of events in the future, or is it just kind of like this is our one-off to prove that we can be transparent and our intentions are good here?
Yeah, I mean, the United States now since 2019, I believe they've admitted 5 civilian deaths in Afghanistan, including the 2 that they admitted here, Gultahir Muhammad and Miriam Shiloh Muse. So this is hundreds of strikes, hundreds of drone strikes, and just 5 killed. Air Wars, the UK airstrike monitoring group that monitors the U.S. drone war in Afghanistan very intensely. Their number is up to 3,000% higher as far as what they think the actual number of civilian casualties are. So the United States, I mean, they definitely lowball these figures. They're very unlikely to admit a civilian death, but I mean, it's a slight improvement over the first nearly 2 decades of the U.S. war in Somalia, but it's certainly not indicative of what the real cost has been to civilians.
Right.
So, in the last couple of minutes, I was wondering if you could sort of help people understand some of the shifts that happened under Trump with the drone war, particularly in Somalia, to sort of allow for certain kinds of strikes that might have not been typically allowed before, and also if you have any sense or insight as to whether or not the situation has changed very much under a Joe Biden presidency when it comes to activities in Somalia, or even just more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as Trump was elected, it looks like U.S. Africa Command decided that they were going to ask for loosened rules of engagement. And within really just a few days of Trump taking office, the Pentagon sent the Secretary of Defense at the time, Jim Mattis, to present plans to loosen the rules of engagement, which Trump did within a few short weeks of taking office. And basically, what they had asked for was that there no longer be high level or White House approval necessary of drone strikes, that it would go down to a ground level commander, someone in Somalia. So be a colonel or 1-star general, fairly low down. And this meant that strikes would be carried out a lot quicker, with a lot fewer checks and balances, safeguards in place. And when I spoke with a drone pilot and also a strike cell analyst who worked in Somalia at the same time that the strike took place, he told me that, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but it was, he said something like, when I went to Africa, it seemed like no one was paying attention. And he said it was like we can do whatever we want. And he said it was a very different mindset from the special operations forces that he worked with in Afghanistan. He said there was almost no quality control on the vetting of strikes, and that a lot of the safeguards that had been previously in place had been left out. I heard from another U.S. official, an intelligence official, who said that members of these special operations task forces that worked on drone strikes in Somalia, Yemen, and Libya also began competing at that time for the highest body count. And it's shades of what went on in Vietnam. This type of behavior was supposed to be rooted out, but he told me that this was going on. So there was an incentivization for strikes to be carried out. And then the drone pilot and strike cell analyst I talked to told me there was also another factor sort of at the low end, that they had just introduced new, what they call devices. It's like a little award that goes on a medal or a ribbon. These previously were always given out for, what historically we've known as combat. You're on the ground, you're in a firefight, that type of thing. But they introduced these new devices for drone pilots, sensor operators, members of a strike cell, so people who conduct remote warfare. And he said that that at the lowest level there, again, people wanted to brag about being in combat. They wanted to show that they'd been out there, even if they were, in a command post somewhere, carrying out these strikes, and that also incentivized the conduct of strikes and made it a lot more likely that strikes would get carried out and that bad strikes would get carried out.
Jesus.
Psychopath.
Well, it's incredibly depressing to think about the loss of life. And its attachment to some people's vanity. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nick, we really appreciate you taking some time to join us today on Left Reckoning. We'll link again to the piece for people to read it, and always appreciate reading your work in the Intercept and other places, friend.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to have Nick on again.
Truly.
Actual journalist. Yeah, what were you going to say?
No. I mean, even on that, I don't mean this like against Nick at all, but like truly amazing that Nick can go and figure out what's going on, but the U.S. government's sort of like, it's sort of impossible to know. It's impossible for us to know who we've affected or who we might have killed here.
Look, we drop a lot of bombs. Okay. If you dropped as many bombs as we did, you might not know who they all killed either, okay? It's easy to say when you aren't dropping a lot of bombs in all sorts of different places in the world and letting contractors do it as they're amped up on Mountain Dew in a command center somewhere, like playing a slightly better graphics version of Call of Duty. They can't know that little few pixels on the screen there, they can't know, and you couldn't either, if that is a woman or a child. It's really sick. And it's not this is why we need to what Israel's doing. Not only couldn't it be done with our material support, but also our pioneering in support of we covered with the hospital bombing in Afghanistan, and Medicine Sans Frontier saying, actually, we can't allow them to investigate themselves on this. Please, can we do an independent investigation? Nah. Here's a few $100 or couple $1,000 if you lost somebody. Yankee Doodle.
Blood money. Yeah. Truly disgusting stuff. And for all the anti-imperialists out there who are supporting one favorite child, she's been spending a lot of time in Africa, actually, helping out a lot of these operations.
Oh, Tulsi?
Yes, sir.
Right, yeah. She's on maneuvers, yeah.
No, but yeah, please read Nick's piece and keep up with his work in general. And his books really are excellent, so they're worth picking up and reading through. We're really happy to have him on the program. Folks, in just a minute, we're going to go over the post game. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to that. We got some fun stuff, some good clips, and we'll be taking some questions. Probably not as many as normal because I have a really early flight, so it's gonna be a shorter post game. Just letting people know, but we'll try to get to a couple for sure. But Matt, before we get there, should we check out our new kind of story of the of the month here in Argentina? In Argentina, a pretty seismic election result with Javier Milei defeating Sergio Massa on 56 to 44%. And I'm sure people have seen some stuff of his. We have a couple clips here we're going to play for y'all. But maybe just to give people a taste, this is who is now going to be the next president of Argentina.
al zurdo de mierda no le podés dar ni un milímetro.
Pero ¿me podés definir zurdo de mierda? Que no
Todos
lo
los que,
entiendo?
digamos, los colectivistas, los que ponen, digamos, o sea, esa idea... A ver,
¿Por qué le pones de mierda, digamos?
Porque son una mierda. O sea,
vos mezclás...
no,
pero
pero es que
eso
si
es
pensás,
pero
si pensás distinto te van a aniquilar. Ese es el punto. Es decir, vos al zurdo no le podés dar un milímetro, porque le das un milímetro y lo toma para destrozarte. Es decir, digamos, o sea, vos no podés negociar con el zurdo. No se negocia. No se negocia con esa mierda, no se negocia porque te van a llevar puesto. Si tienen un golpeador que caga trompadas a la mujer, digamos, si es de ellos, ¿me entendés? Se pone el pañuelito verde y grita todo el tiempo contra el neoliberalismo, lo ocultan. ¿Me entendés? O sea, si de repente hay alguien que acosó a un periodista que acosa a otra periodista, lo ocultan. Es decir, a todos los de ellos lo ocultan. Todas esas aberraciones la ocultan. Ahora, si vos estás del otro lado, a vos te van a estropear, te van a matar, te van a dar con lo que sea. No les importa arruinarte la vida. ¿Por qué? Porque no pensás como ellos. ¿Y sabes qué es lo bueno de todo esto?
So we could keep playing that. As you can see there, an extremely disturbed individual. And I'll just say two things up top. One, anytime anyone says things like online isn't real, I mean, here we are seeing truly like a Reddit thread coming to life.
Yeah.
Frankly, another kind of classic example of the right wing grievance politics, which absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I think is if there's anything to sort of take from that bizarre meltdown there, is that there is a kind of mirror image of some of the overperformative online left-wing behavior and some of the overperformative online right-wing behavior, right? A constant appeal to grievance, the deck stacked against me, the other team's not playing fair, hysterical, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we have some more clips and things to get into, but maybe let's just introduce him. And I should have pulled this, Matt. If you can, no worries. If not, if you could get an image of him in his superhero costume, that might be helpful.
Okay, yeah.
But just just introducing this fellow to folks. I'm sure most people know him. I've seen some things about him. He's a strange guy. As we know, as people have probably seen, he has a bizarre relationship with his dogs, which he has had cloned. He says that is his informal cabinet, that he still gets messages from his dead dog, who all of his dogs are clones of. He campaigned with a chainsaw, saying that that's what he's going to do to the government, basically cut it up. He's run on a kind of promise to destroy the government. There are viral clips of him walking down a list of all of the different departments of government in Argentina and ripping them, saying, we're getting rid of it, we're getting rid of it, we're getting rid of it. Bizarre comments on other political figures. Yes, there he is. That's a really, really cheap version of, I guess, Marvel DC. I don't know the difference, I have to admit.
And Catman.
He's ANCAP, which, as people probably, if they don't know it, that's an anarcho-capitalist. Just a strange individual. There was the video of him after the first round of elections, of him sort of having what I would have to say is a mental breakdown. We're sort of complaining about voices in the room that were getting too loud. People had sort of thought, oh, maybe that might be the end of him. Obviously not. This is somebody who has said in the past that, he believes that there should be his anarcho-capitalist beliefs are so extreme and staunch and true that he believes that, there should be a market in human organs, something that he has walked back. But still, this is the kind of character that we're dealing with.
The anarcho-capitalist sort of posture, always like, bro, you would be comfortable talking to any of those Chicago school vampires that turned your country into a killing field. There's anarchists, sure. You are a neoliberal with a funny haircut. Like, that's what's going on here. And probably some personality disorders, if not like more severe pathologies.
Well, I'm sorry. Anyone who truly identifies themselves as an anarcho capitalist or whatnot, does have a personality disorder. Notably because, they are effectively just a conservative, somebody who believes in free markets, the thing that is in power all across the globe, right? Somebody who believes in power, in the things that are in power globally, But for whatever reason, you can't be honest with yourself. So you need to lie to the globe and start talking about anarchism or some other bullshit. No,
Right.
yeah, as you were saying, Matt, I totally agree. Somebody who'd be very happy having a conversation with, and look, and he names all of his dogs after the famous
Right.
economists of neoliberalism.
Austrians,
Right?
yeah.
The radicalism there is again, it's just like a personal branding exercise for somebody who, for whatever reason, wants to defend power, wants to defend the status quo, but needs to, for whatever reason, present themselves as some kind of radical alternative. He's also noted that, to many people's consternation, that he won't work with, quote, communist China, which is an economic disaster for a country like Argentina, or communist Brazil, for that matter. Obviously, talking about Lula da Silva.
Lula and G, get his ass. That's all I have to say about that. Like, bring him to heel. I want to see him grovel to maintain trade relations. Like, that's the thing, is like this. He's president now because of economic conditions, because the Peronist sort of regime has just completely expanded itself. And been unable to deal with things that a lot. I'm curious actually how much this is to do with obviously the post-COVID inflation stuff, but also our interest rate hikes. I wonder what that impact
plays a massive
has.
role here.
Yeah.
I know we have another clip, so you just tell me when you want to slot this in. But look, I'm sorry to be boring y'all, because, and I'm probably not doing a good job, because this guy is such a character. You could do an entire show just looking at, how cartoonish and insane this guy is. And there are people who are funnier than I am who are probably going to spend a lot of time doing that. I think this shit is, I mean, it's horrifying what this means for Argentine people. But this guy is a cartoon character brought to life. It's incredible. But this is something that at a certain point, no offense to them, but the kind of Daily Show, John Oliver style, wow, look how insane the right wing is. It starts to ring a little hollow, because we've had Trump, we've had Bolsonaro, we're having Milei, time and time again. Like, this is a character that we're going to be dealing with, and I think nothing wrong with laughing at them or fucking around, taking the piss, but at a certain point, we have to start talking about the reasons that this kind of thing is happening. Because Argentina, like many other countries, is dealing with the consequences of a kind of global regime, of a global model that is in permanent crisis. Argentina, like many countries, is struggling with recession, a poverty rate that's around 40%, hyperinflation, which is certainly no small part of the reason that he was elected, tremendously high debt, which has been a constant theme of Argentine politics for a while, along with rising crime. And yes, the Peronist coalition, tried to do another move to maintain legitimacy, failed here. Massa tried to distance himself from maybe the more left-wing or center-left parts of the Peronist coalition, but as we said, lost 56 to 44% here. And as you were just saying, Matt, no doubt about it, if people have been watching my coverage or this program, particularly TMBS in early Left Reckoning days, we were talking a lot about what I was calling the vulture capitalist class. And Argentina is a country that is highly indebted. You have very powerful institutions that are trying to prey on that debt. And as people might remember, Macri, the president before Fernandez, basically sold the country out to dry, taking on ridiculous amounts of debt for the country, which the country was forced to sort of service during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you saw the Fernandez government, which fell into trap after trap, failure after failure. This is no defense of them. But basically being constrained by a bunch of wealthy financiers in the United States and abroad saying, hey, we want our money. I don't give a shit if that means that people are going to go without food. But that is the noose that is brought by the global financial system, which plays a massive role in countries all across South America, but particularly in Argentina. And one of the big things that Milei has sort of promised to do is to replace the peso with the United States dollar. Not just peg the peso to the US dollar, but to use the US dollar as the currency of Argentina. The problem with this is that the Argentine central bank does not have enough dollars to be able to do that, right? Not to get too in the weeds about these kind of things, but if you want to replace currency, you have to have a currency reserve. They don't have a currency reserve to be able to do that because most of the US dollars that they have are used to pay off debts that are denoted in the US dollar, right? So the promise, and we'll get into maybe some of the issues there in a moment, but like they don't even have the fiscal capacity to be able to do that because they can't print US dollars. And he also does not have a majority in Congress. So this is somebody who's going to come and be loud, who was sort of brought into victory because of the inflation crisis, because of the economic mismanagement of the country, and because a lot of the kind of center-right parties basically lined up behind him at the end of the day. We have this clip here, Matt. If maybe we can play this first, and then I have some more things to sort of say about the economic situation. But like, I think that there's just two things to really note if you're trying to take a top line from this, is that this guy is going to deliver even more dark days to Argentina. So nothing that we're saying right here is to try to dissuade somebody who's feeling distraught or depressed or upset about what's going on. But the hope that I'm trying to sort of lay out for people is to orient your frustration at the right forces, because these guys, like, it's just like in the United States, like Trump, devastating figure, did tremendous damage to people all across this country and all across the globe. A bad figure, somebody who did tremendous amounts of damage. But something happens when these people become avatars of dysfunction, in particularly in liberal sets. Where instead of sort of looking at the structural issues that are causing decline, that are causing devastation, that are causing pain for people, instead, if only the crazy guy wasn't in charge, then things would be better. No, the crazy guy is in charge because of the failures of the establishment powers. But anyways, let's establish a little bit more of this guy. We have this clip here to sort of talk about the kind of bizarre, contradictory nature of a figure like Milei.
So yeah, you talking about this Tucker Carlson clip?
Yes.
So yeah, just to get a sense of like, let's learn about this libertarian. Is he going to have any interesting sort of orthodox opinions about stuff? Well, here he is on abortion, talk with Tucker.
You oppose abortion. Why?
Bueno, porque como liberal, o sea, liberal libertario, aclaro, porque en inglés...
I'll just say he's saying because of someone who believes in liberalism, and then he talks about like, I'm a libertarian and liberalism is a different thing. That's what he's going on.
Liberal es distinto. Así que lo voy a decir como
So let me say as a
libertario.
libertarian.
Nosotros creemos que el liberalismo es el respeto irrestricto del proyecto de vida del
Unrestricted
prójimo,
respect for the lives of others.
basado en el principio de no agresión
Non-aggression
y en
principle.
defensa del derecho a la vida, a la libertad y a la propiedad. Por lo tanto, adhiriendo a las ideas de la libertad, básicamente una de las ideas fundamentales es defender el
Fundamental
derecho a la vida. O sea,
right to defend
filosóficamente
life.
estoy a favor de
I'm in favor
respetar
of the
el
right to
derecho a la
life.
vida. Después hay una justificación desde el plano de vista de la ciencia,
Scientific
de las ciencias
justification.
naturales, digamos, que es el hecho de que la vida
Life
comienza
begins at conception.
en el momento de la fecundación. Y en ese mismo momento se genera un nuevo ser en evolución, ¿sí? Con un ADN distinto. Es decir, es cierto que la mujer tiene derechos sobre su cuerpo, pero ese niño dentro del
women have right to their own
no
bodies,
es su cuerpo.
But a child is not her body.
Es decir, el niño no es su cuerpo. Por lo tanto, el aborto es un asesinato agravado por el vínculo.
And so an abortion is an assassinato. The Argentinian far-right leader uses the word assassination. Again, 30,000 people, I think, is a conservative estimate for the amount of people that were killed by the military in the Dirty War. And those were supposedly like communist infiltrators. And no, a lot were just teachers and union leaders and stuff like that. So to say that women having abortions are assassinating their kids, I think that's libertarians, right? Like this, it's funny how, like, what kind of liberty are we talking about? Is it, actually, the state does have an interest in policing your reproductive decisions, including maybe treating it like a murder, maybe getting the state involved for like a murder prosecution because you didn't want to carry that pregnancy to term. That is this type of libertarianism. Just another brief one. Just to point this up, maybe we're seeing a lot. We've been talking about this with Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, a lot in the right wing of and who knows how toxic it's going to get on the anti-Israel side. But maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should be isolationist with regards to Israel Palestine. Well, of course, Milei here waving a giant Israel flag. He will not be. That is not his position. Nor is it. I believe he is pro standing with Ukraine as well. So really like a libertarian, but kind of like behind the times and not made for this new era of more maybe online orthodoxy, to go back to what he said. But yeah, I mean, libertarian, but also pro-Israel is such a fucking ridiculous position to have. You are in support of the UN, like creating a partitioning a place for a settler colonial project enforced by hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money, just to name the U.S. Yeah, libertarian my ass.
It's not a serious philosophy, right? The right to life, except for millions of Palestinians.
Yeah.
It falls apart quickly. Libertarians, I think in general, probably is one of the least serious ideologies out there. It's a nitpicky ideology because functionally, what it represents, what it has always sort of represented, is just a very clear, full-throated defense of power, and he thinks that the powerful should rule, and that the rest of the people should just sort of get in line. And again, I think Jean Bajelon said it best when the trick of the right these days is to try to make the powerful seem oppressed, and that's exactly what this guy is all about. Shouldn't be unsurprising to anybody that this guy's a big crypto booster as well.
That's the thing I've been wondering since I heard he wants to go onto the US dollar. Like, is this just because crypto is
making money
tanking? Look, crypto, and I mean, this may be a topic for a different day, it definitely is, but not looking good for crypto in this moment, because I just saw a news report that said Hamas and ISIS and several other Islamic groups have been using it. And the thing is I don't think we're going to see a lot of the Bitcoin guys tout that as a use, because anecdotally I've seen a lot of them come into my replies saying I'm anti-Semitic for supporting Palestine. It's a weird little thing, and it's also a good test case of, like, if Hamas is, for instance, using that significantly, they're going to kill it. Like it is one thing, because the WikiLeaks was the other example prior to that, where a use for that technology was actually, I think, counter the world powers. And I think on balance, it doesn't do that. So I think that's why it's tolerated. But yeah, we'll see. But I also think, like, all that shit's really down, and I haven't seen much coming back. And not to ramble too much, but AI is also struggling. So yeah.
But, in closing, we'll just say this. What is there to rage against? What is there to rage against if you are somebody who believes in free markets and privatization?
The Malvinas Islands.
Yes, sir. Which I have seen some funny things about, I mean, this is somebody who praises Margaret Thatcher, which people did think was also going to get him in trouble, obviously, for anyone who remembers the Falkland Wars. But the situation is bad enough in Argentina. He was able to get away with that. But Alex Hochuli, who's a former guest of this program, a great writer, hosted the Bunga Cast, which I listen to regularly, wrote a really great piece in the Unheard on his election, saying, quote, "If neighboring Brazil's experience with Jair Bolsonaro is anything to go by, the administration will be more conventionally neoliberal in economic matters, while radicalism will be expressed in the cultural field. Calling the Pope, quote, a lefty son of a bitch, and antagonizing the country's second largest trading partner, China, by saying he won't work with communists may foreshadow some of his antics in government." And I think that's a very astute point, because here's the thing with Milei. What is there for him to rage against? Well, he likes to sit around and talk about collectivists in the far left and the damage that they have done. Argentina is a test case in neoliberal economics. More than anything that we're seeing right now, Argentina is an example of the failed neoliberal project. from the debt vultures that we were talking about a little while ago that have been strangling the country, preventing it from being able to embark on any kind of serious industrialization or social programs, to the failure of the political center and the center left of the Peronists. Argentina matches much of the world's history when it comes to development, with the 90s being a period of mass disinvestment from public industry and of mass privatization of state-owned industries, which led to, surprise, surprise, economic devastation for the nation and reliance on finance capital. For somebody who believes in the free market, Argentina is a great example of what happens when you are over-reliant on finance capital, when you are over-reliant on neoliberalization, when you are over-reliant on the market to solve all social ills in a society. And let's just say he gets his way for a second, right? That there's mass disinvestment in the public economy, what is left, or just government in general. And he's successful in creating an over-reliance on US dollars, right? If he's able somehow to not just peg the peso to the US dollar, but actually to use the United States dollar as the currency of the country of Argentina. What will we see, Matt? Well, it will be something that mirrors exactly what Argentina's economic development over the past 3 decades have been. Dependence on export, limiting industrialization of the country, and a reliance on resource extraction and agricultural exports, right? So a lack of industrialization in the economy, a reliance on resource extraction, and on selling cheap beef, wine, and soybeans to the United States and to other countries, right? Not really a model for economic success for everyday people. But again, this is not what Milei is running on or anything like that. In all seriousness, the promised break with these collectivists and all this kind of, and this break with the old model is nowhere to be found in this platform. Instead, what we will see from him is a deepening of the neoliberal project, just like we got under Bolsonaro, just like we got under Trump, just like we saw in Italy, just like we're seeing in all of these kind of, quote, far-right populist states, and some money for the connected rich. And I mean, if there's anything else you want to say on Argentina in particular, go ahead. But I will just say as a final note on this, the real thing that we should be noting is that with all these crises, in Argentina, in Brazil, in the United States, all across the globe, what we are left with is an incompetent center and a more fervent and radical right wing. But when it comes to actual solutions to global decline, there's no real answer, because what happens is you get these kind of bombastic figures in there who do culture war, who say crazy things and say, hey, I'm going to get rid of the bad guys in government. And what ends up securing itself in those nations? More devout version of neoliberalization, a more devout version of privatization, which has been the model of both the right-wing parties and of the center-left parties in the United States, across South America, across Europe, right? The thing that's bizarre about this kind of political moment that we're living through, Matt, is that, with all of these things that sort of point to maybe an opening or a breaking point with the neoliberal consensus, the only answers that we have really seen come into power politically are just doubling down on neoliberalization. And the center left plays a huge role in sort of maintaining the space for these far right figures. And the only real threat to them electorally so far, for the most part, has just been these far right figures. So it's maintain crisis under the center left, expanded crisis under the far right. And it's a really, really, really nasty and never-ending circle that the establishment certainly has no answers to, and a very, very weakened left that has turned away from labor and has turned to culture as its primary battleground, means that what we're sort of left with is a permanent passing of the baton between two dangerous forces of the same ideological bent, which is more privatization, more neoliberalization, and more damage to working people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the example. It's just like everyone was counting on. Oh, he's too wacky. So the same sclerotic, arthritic, Peronist, like basically center left, center to center right administration will win. And it's like there's only so long you can roll that dice.
I mean, it was funny, not to bring up random small Twitter accounts, but I won't say them by name. I'm not trying to be a coward. I just don't want to send everyone to harass some small account on Twitter. But somebody responded to me retweeting this story being a bit like, Jesus Christ, this is bad. Like, well, this is exactly what's coming for America if everybody doesn't sort of line up behind Joe Biden again. It's like, no, this is exactly what happens when the only answer is like, oh, the far right's super crazy. We just need to continue destroying, allowing these countries to stagnate and decline. This is exactly what our future is like. If your only answer to any crisis is what we need to do is lock arms and defend the same kind of established order, which has laid the groundwork for all these kind of permanent crises. Because the right won't even break the thing that's so like it's not even like I'm rooting for them. Don't get me wrong. It's that they are so. Anyone who is on the far right is a product of power and capital. Right. So they can complain about the cultural mores of the left. Right. And what they really mean by that is like the establishment, the neoliberals, etc. But fundamentally, they want to see the same kind of inequities in society be maintained. Right. The inequities of wealth, the inequities of political power for certain kinds of groups. So all that you see is these kind of really damaging. Again, I'm not denying that they're damaging, extremely damaging, but continuation of what was already ongoing in society, because the right has no answer to it, because the right has no intention or desire to see these kind of things that are fundamentally broken in society be changed. So what we end up having is this bizarre game where you have, again, the center left maintaining decline and the right accelerating it. Pretty nasty situation. And the only answer is always going to have to be revitalized movement back to the people, which means supporting labor, supporting working class people, and building up independent organizations that can challenge both the far right menace and the center left pimps who maintain these kind of damaging forces with all of their glittering phrases. In the same way that Milei is going to talk about collectivists, and all these damaging folks, the center does the same thing when they talk about extremists or whatever. Right? Same kind of politics at the end of the day, and we have to break out of it.
Yeah.
Well, folks, on that note, I'm sure, it's probably we need to get some good folks from Argentina on to talk a little bit more in depth about this in the near future, and I'm sure we will. But we're going to jump over to the post-game, patreon.com/leftreckoning, get access to that. We'll be taking a couple questions. It's going to be a little bit shorter just because I have to run tonight. But we have this great Candace Owens bit that we're going to dive into, take some questions from y'all and see you.
Yeah. Probably no calls tonight, so don't waste your breath there. But fun stuff we're going to get into. Norm Finkelstein was on Candace Owens, and there's one moment that I think answers one of our most recent comments on a YouTube video, which is that David Pakman is right. Gazans chose their leadership themselves.
Oh,
and
that was a good one.
And so we're going to respond to that.
Monsters.
Actually, Norm Finkelstein is given the opportunity to basically undo that little nugget of that little talking point in support of bombing hospitals. But yeah, patreon.com/leftreckoning. Come over and I'm also going to indulgently play another Avi Shlaim clip just because, But anyway, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
See y'all there.